All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Neil Peterson. I'm the president of Open Design Alliance. There's maybe a few new people here that don't know about us, so I'll just talk a couple of minutes about the organization. We are a nonprofit technology consortium, 1,200 members. Our mission is interoperability for CAD and BIM. We have a set of toolkits that support proprietary file formats like DWG, DGN, Revit, Navisworks. And we also support open formats, STEP and IFC. And in addition to that, we do some complementary technologies, visualization, PDF publishing, web visualization, have our own solid modeler and constraints engine that we're developing. So a lot of interesting stuff, but today I want to just talk about some of the latest development that we've done on our IFC SDK. So we've got a growing user base for IFC, and we're getting some interesting requests coming from our members. Model combining, we've got people that want to take a set of federated models and combine them, not just visualize them together, but actually combine them back into one consolidated IFC file. We want people want to do the opposite, take a large model and split it up, either create a set of federated models or take an existing large model and split it out into a set of federated files. Visual editing, so we're getting requests for that. Tools for debugging, analysis, optimization, even for our own needs. So we get a bug file in, you get a large model, and one small element isn't visualizing properly. We want tools that you can go in and select that and delete everything else easily out of the model, or copy it over into a new file. So it's easy to work with large data. And large models, efficient handling of large models is an ongoing request. We keep getting bigger and bigger files from our customers. To support some of these requests, we're working on a set of high-level model operations. So cloning instance subtrees is one operation that we need to support these features. We want to be able to delete IFC product-derived instances and the geometry associated with them. Moving an element within a subtree instead of just cloning and deleting. And we also need to be able to scale models. If we're trying to combine models that have different units, then we need to do scaling so that they're in the same units. The merging and splitting is being done by our cloning operation. So we have people coming in with 4 or 5 models with different domain information. So we take that, and if you clone an existing model into a new model, you can do the merging operation through that, and the same way you can do the splitting, taking one node and cloning it out into a new model. So you can implement merging and splitting through the cloning operation. And the other thing we've been working on is a prototype for IFC assemblies, and so we're getting requests to support federated models, and instead of just creating some type of container that's specific to ODA, we would like to see something adopted into the standards so you can easily, everybody can represent federated models in the same way. And we put together a prototype. It's not intended to be like saying this is the way to do it. It's more of an experiment, and we're looking for some feedback. So we're trying to find something that works for us, and we'd like feedback from the group here or the larger group. We just working on this the last couple of months, so we haven't actually put it out into a release yet. But I'd like to just show here what we've done so far. IFC external file is abstraction of a model source, and then from that you get IFC digital file is a link to a file on a physical drive, and IFC hyperlink file is a URL. And then we have IFC product insertion, so reference to an IFC product derived instance in a reference model. I've got some minor issues losing IFC class in the original model. We're still working on this to try and figure out the best way to do it. But you can do a product insertion. And then we have adding IFC external representation. It's a reference to an IFC geometric representation item in another model. And currently this seems like the best way that our guys have found to do this. And you can insert either the full model, or you can specify a set of handles to do a subset of the model. These are schema changes that were added on to IFC 4.3. And just some examples. So we have here original file, the IFC building element proxy, and then IFC polygonal face set, and IFC shape representation with a swept solid. That's what you have in the original file. And instead of that, you can do IFC external representation. So the second example, so you still have the building element proxy, but then instead the next line is IFC digital file with the swept solid and a separate model, and then IFC external representation after that. So that's one way to reference the external file. And you can also, an alternative way to do it is the IFC product insertion example. And here the product insertion replaces some of the original file contents. So our guys are thinking this is maybe not the best way to do it, but it's a way to do assemblies in IFC. So we've been playing around with this. We need the capability for the federated models just to be able to represent them. But one other advantage that we found, we took a file here. This is an airport terminal and some planes. That's 170 megabytes. And by extracting the geometry, just the geometry out into an external file, we can load that and then unload the IFC data. We load that file, visualize it, and then we can unload the IFC data, and it allows us to visualize the combined model with a much smaller memory footprint than if you just load the entire model in and you have to keep the entire model in memory. So we're finding that we can optimize peak memory usage by splitting out geometry and selectively dividing the file up so that we can keep just the property information that we need in memory after the file's been visualized. And it's important for some of our customers. We have our software runs on all platforms, and we have a lot of customers that are trying to do viewers on mobile platforms, and memory is at a premium. So we get a lot of requests to be able to do visualization with a low memory footprint. And so that's one of the applications here. I think we got about a 40% drop here in peak memory usage by using this technique in this one particular example. So overall status with this work, the clone and deletion, we've got that into our latest product release, IFC SDK. Move is in progress. Merging and splitting is in progress to be done later this year. These experiments with assemblies, we've just gotten those in kind of a beta version. At this point, it's not released. We've got it working in our viewer, our OpenIFC viewer, in an experimental version. So it's really available to anybody that wants to take a look at this stuff. And we'll put out some kind of release in the next couple of months, I think. But we really are looking for feedback or beta users. If anybody here is interested in taking a look at this stuff or seeing if it might satisfy some of your needs, we'd be really glad to get some feedback. And we can pick up the discussion offline, or if anyone has any questions, certainly welcome any feedback. But that's all I wanted to present for today. Does anyone have any questions or comments, feedback?
Operations on a viewer only, or is available in ODA, some toolkit?
All the operations are available in our toolkit, and then we're trying to implement user level features on top of that in the viewer.
Excuse me. Have you looked at any streaming technologies for using the viewer from the cloud and stuff like that?
We do have a streaming technology that we've developed ourselves, so we can take the IFC or any of the supported file formats that we have and convert them over to an optimized graphics cache format. Mm-hmm. And then that format has been designed to support streaming down to the browser. And then we have the viewing technology in the browser that works with that streaming format, so you can do web visualization. Cloud.opendesign.com, you can check it out yourself. Cloud.opendesign.com. Sign up for a free account. You can upload some models and try it out.
Cloud.oda.com.
Open Design. Cloud.opendesign.com. And you can get an account and check it out.
Are the assemblies, let's say this. Do you take a merged file and break it into pieces, or I'm just trying to think like your example where you had the geometry separated from the properties.
We're doing that separation ourselves. People are asking for tools to sort of automate that. There's people that have big models that want to, and I think it's not clear yet if there's a general way that you can just split a large model up. But we're at least getting the low-level tool set so that if you can pick where you want to divide it up, we have the tools that'll actually break it. And then I think it's a different question to say how should you apply those tools to a particular model. And that maybe is on the user side a little bit. I think we haven't gotten that far yet to see what to do with this.
So in the assembly, you're not trying to do like, or maybe you are, like have a file that has the sort of shape representation and then do a sort of remote map into an assembly. Are you doing that sort of thing, or is this more of a sort of, you know, split files into pieces of information, and you would have one or multiple files that has geometry and one or multiple files that has properties?
I think you can use it in any way that you want. We've been just trying to split out the geometry right now so that we can optimize the loading process and we can unload pieces. But it's really a flexible general technology. You can split a model any way you like. And it supports like nesting and everything. It's not just a container at the top level. You can nest as deep as you like.
Does it replace other geometry? Did you have like a low-level detail geometry that you replace with a high-level detail geometry?
No, we haven't done anything like that.
I see there's a type, IFC external representation. Is that a IFC type, or is it about to be introduced to the next version?
These are new types introduced as like an experimental schema at this point. And if it's something that resonates with people and seems to solve a problem, then I think we can take it to buildingSMART and see if it needs to go into some new version. But we're not that far yet. I think we still want to get some feedback to see if it really is a good solution.
I guess one question I have is, obviously you have a concept that this file is going to record other files, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the base concept. Does it make sense that the other files will be included as IFC entities, or should it be special header information, which is like, you know, here are the things I'm referencing, here are the digital files, here are the hyperlink files, here are the blah files?
I don't know that I'm the guy to answer that. I think maybe take that up with our guys, with Igor or.
Yeah, I mean that's just my suggestion that I could follow up. Sure.
Yeah.
Again, it seems a bit odd to me that this would be. Like, what is the purpose of that? Is that when I'm supposed to read it when I hit that line, you know, or how do I collect them? I feel like it's something you want to know ahead of time. Hey, here's what you're going to see below, right? You're going to see references to these.
Yeah, we could definitely add something to do that.
And the follow-up question that would be, and then should you be referring to them by name or by Google, right?
Yeah, I think that's an open question. Yeah.
There's a question there. Shape file.
Oh.
Is there any meetings?
Yeah, the question is, the old Azure shape files also split geometry and data, so it seems to be common.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the old Azure shape files. But.
Well, I am, but that's still in the same file. Well, no, you're right. The database file is separate from the geometry file just because of the format of the files.
No short-term plans for JavaScript either. Question on the chat.
My attempt to create an assembly just failed, so it's your first test case. I have a question on you said you got vendor feedback or customer feedback that they want to do merging and not just geometry.
We've got requests that people want to take models and actually put them into build a giant IFC model with all the combined data. And I don't know, like, on the user end, like where that's coming from, but it's coming from a serious customer. It's not just some request.
Implications on merging things like IFC sites, IFC projects. Any ideas already on how you're going to deal with that, or is that?
It's in progress. I can't answer those questions, but maybe at the next meeting right now, it's working prototype like that.
And everybody that does this already, you have to pick a winner.
Yeah.
Level, site, building. Well, get a multiple buildings, but.
Yeah, that's the eternal question, right? How are you going to make the decisions?
There is a workflow, for example, Revex designed the whole building and the other product designed the furniture. And the furniture doesn't have a specific location or like instant position placement. They just, okay, this furniture will place into every room along somewhere. And the things they can do is bring that mechanical design or product design into applications like Revex. And then instance them, replace them, and then export IFC. The question is, if there is IFC presenting the building, and then I want export my product as IFC, but IFC somehow be referenced, externally referenced by the IFC that's representing the building. So that's a kind of similar scenario as you described the merge the two IFC files into one.
That is the kind of use case that the furniture into the building, the placement of furniture into a building is one of the use cases that we've gotten, and we want to try and solve that. So you can do some simple editing.
Is your viewer that you referenced there, is it open source?
It's not open source, but it's free. It's open IFC viewer. It's a free download for Mac and Windows.
Okay.
And Linux will be available this year later. You can get the source code for all of our products if you join as a member. So the source code is available, but it's not open source. You have to join and pay as a member.
Any status update on the HDF5 experiments, or is that dormant now?
I mean, we implemented that stuff, but it's like, here it is, and
Yeah.
and then we're waiting for feedback, and it was kind of crickets. So we just kind of stopped because plus it doesn't seem to. I don't remember the numbers, but it doesn't always give like really good results. So
Yeah.
I don't know that it's.
Yeah, I remember it, yeah.
So Bentley is clearly a member and also a user of ODA.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. So what is the best way to communicate like desires or even like test results and stuff like that to your team?
Shoot me an email. I'll give you my card. I can, depending on what area you're interested in, I can connect you with the right people. But you can just, we're a nonprofit. Contact us directly, and we're not a bureaucracy or anything. You can talk directly to our team leads. So be happy to get feedback on that.
Yeah, very responsive.
Yeah, I mean, I've dealt with ODA in EGM import and export in a totally different, not even with Bentley. So yeah, I've always been very impressed with your work. But that's not the problem. I just wanted to figure out if there was any specific route I had to be on, because of course now I have some ideas on how like SDKs in general, but also ODA could really improve our way of communicating between vendors.
We'd be really happy to get that kind of information. Most of the communication we get from our members is bug reports. So we don't have this like established channel for somebody who's trying to help us like that. But we'll definitely get proper channels set up and discuss. So thank you for that.
A couple of years ago, there was an update in the STEP standard that had these anchors and references. But you decided not to use that for this.
Yeah, I don't know the details about why, but we implemented that stuff with STEP, and so what our guys said is that they didn't want to add STEP specific. It didn't seem to fit in with IFC, and so this is an experimental implementation that seems to fit better in with the IFC style of doing things. So there was a consideration to just take what STEP has done and just drop it in to the schema, but that didn't seem like the right approach.
Is this a polite way of saying that IFC deviated too much from the STEP standards?
No, I don't think there was any sort of messaging about that was the case. I think that the IFC is appropriate for the domain.
When if memory serves, all those features are a new version of STEP, right? I mean, so I don't know if we've ever done a review to see how substantially different or the same our root version is in that version. Maybe you have.
I know that's something that comes out every so often, like when we're talking about all this monetization, should we just update the latest version of STEP, right? That's monetization.
Right.
And
But
then,
it's like, there's all this stuff.
and then we say that, and then the meeting continues. As it was this time too.
So actually, this was one of the questions also in the chat from Tim, and now Bernard posted a link as well on a discussion about this in 2019 on the forum. So it might be nice to have a look. Well, basically what I'm saying is if you want feedback, then these people that have been commenting on the forum might be good candidates.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll follow up. But we'd like to see a standard solution for the assemblies just because we have demand and people want it, and we don't want to be throwing out another proprietary thing that nobody else can read. So we'd like to see this solved.
Yeah, so buildingSMART, what is the way to get a feature idea like this on the idea list to make it a priority? How does that work?
It depends a little bit on who you ask. If you would ask me, I would say this is so fundamental. This is exactly why we've been discussing this ECS with IFC5. But more short term, there's also use cases from Rail coming again that who really want to do this with IFC4 or 3. So the best way to do this is indeed to describe the use case really good, describe the user story really good, and then gather support from vendors who are dedicated and motivated to implement it and sit around a table and do it. Could be an agenda point for the next meeting. I mean, I can also tell you that you need to write an activity proposal and it needs to be sent to committees that can also be an answer if you want to.
Right, we sit around
Yeah.
5 years later, it's like, oh, yes, fine.
But realistically, they have a lot of those projects that follow the process and then at the end found out that there's no vendors willing to commit to it, so it's dead on arrival. So the best way to do it is to get a really good user story that is really clear and with scope, and then sit around with a couple of vendors and toolbox providers like ODA, RDF, and just figure it out. And for this, also the things is a good example of you just need to figure it out first, test it in practice, and only when it works, we can consider to making it a standard. There's a lot of things currently in the buildingSMART process that are the other way around, which is sometimes also good to get it from the main perspective. For these kind of things, most of the
This one
things
you
that
need
we
an
discussed
implementation really to prove out that it actually is reasonable and that's sufficient and whatever. So
I think it will enable a lot of workflows that we don't even think about right now.
Yeah.
And that'll probably widen the scope of the requirements again. So it'll be interesting to set the boundaries of what you're trying to solve first.
Yeah, that's the most important part. Because if you throw this out, you get a lot of expectations. And so setting the scope and the limitations is the most important.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right. Next,
Radio.
is there anyone else who wants to present? anything?
I'll go after, I'm really there just to show our latest IFC stuff. It's pretty simple, but we're seeing what we're up to currently.
I didn't know if there was a show on
Clive, are you in the meeting?
You know,
I am, yeah,
I
just,
can
I just
start
logged in.
quickly, but,
I might be called
Yeah.
Bachelor's team or something like that, rather than Clive.
I can see a Clive Jordan.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
I'll just promote you to.
How much time do you need for the?
See if he can give me like actually 4.3 file
So I just leave everything else off and just share screen. Yeah.
in our system, which is true. So I think between the three of us, we could really test out some IFC 4.3, particularly bridges,
Yeah, sounds good.
which will be pretty interesting. I just can't do it by something.
Yeah, so if you wanted to use any of the resources, they're all on our page. I'm just going to go to this product tab and talk kind of through the 3 different pieces that we've got, and also show you some of the AI stuff that we just launched this week. The main focus though is IDS, obviously. We've got 3 modules. The first one is plan, and it's a one-click to create, whether it's a BIM execution plan or a project contract, driven by smart fields, kind of making it really easy and quick process. And then scoping a project down to what elements, essentially what properties, what teams are assigned, or what stage or what milestone. And that's what generates the IDS that I'll share with you guys. And then the third step is verification. So if you're not taking the IDS out, and if you wanted to just drop a model in, we also have that ability inside to verify the models for compliance against that scope. So I'm going to log in and actually show you demo and create a new project. And so the principle is if you're using templates from your company, you'll have these properties that are completed from the database. As soon as you start to drag anything in, it starts filling out what it can. And I could add a whole document just by clicking on one button. But the cool part is the AI side of things. If I show you some of that, it might be much better. Let me show some cool stuff. So the cool stuff is everyone's been using AI, ChatGPT, to produce stuff. We're combining it with the concept of creating a starting point really quickly based on a trained model for design and construction. So I'll kind of put this out there. Say you've got good templates with your company, but sometimes there's gaps. And let's test this here. Name a document, any type of construction contract or design contract or anything specific in our industry, like a non-disclosure agreement between the architect and an engineer or something like that. What would you, this is just to prove I've got nothing up my sleeves. So something from the audience. Any suggestions?
A data transfer agreement.
A data transfer agreement. Okay.
Or I don't know what everybody agrees the terms are. But
Okay. So in between, let's say,
yeah, the things we sign with people that we don't have contractual relationships with.
okay. So it's like document,
The cover your ass document says you can't use any of this data.
the terms for transferring data. Let's say from the architect to, or from the architect to the owner, let's say. And we've got 2 options here. The one that says complete my document will create, is it really my machine is so slow? Yeah. Okay, so if we refer to okay. So this is the plan document that we create here, the data. So the data transfer agreement, no idea what's in it. All of this content is created automatically so that you can then go through it and obviously refine it. It's a starting point. Yeah, not sure what to expect, but architect's responsibility, the owner's responsibility, etc. Format delivery, so it's picking up specifics about what types of files can transfer, the ownership and intellectual property, confidentiality. So everything you would kind of expect in a document. Any questions about that? Sorry for disjointed.
So ChatGPT generated you a hierarchy of things that is now a contract, and you post-process that to have this in your interface, right?
Yeah, the easiest way is to say yes.
Okay.
You had issues with it that ChatGPT doesn't. Sometimes it just generates some nonsense. Do you find, have you had problems with that, where it just generates things that are just wrong and you have to fix that stuff, or what?
It's not 100%, and this is early days, but and the principle is it's a starting point. So it's the tools that are like this. So I've got some things in here that I might have made some updates and some errors, and it's about how to use those tools to make corrections. So if I was to select this set of text and use the correct feature, for example. I see. Okay. All right. So we've got some tools in here that are able to like fix things and expand on your thought, or if you've got something that's a bit too detailed and you want to simplify it or summarize it. So these tools are there to kind of just enhance and kind of give you more power rather than try and generate everything. I mean, the demo to generate everything is just kind of like, this is how powerful it could be, but really it's more designed to simplify your workflow and make it easier to do those things that you generally do faster.
Okay.
And is the system keeping track of the prompts and the results?
The prompts and the results, as far as yes, but it's not something that's generally exposed to the user.
Okay, but it does remember what you asked before and what the output was.
We have a full history and a change management to show what those updates are, from version to version.
Okay.
But we're going to talk about the IDS, so maybe will that work on here if I'm on the machine? Yeah. Okay. So let's try it. So if we've created a specification that a set of requirements are needed from certain teams at certain points in time, and say we've got certain walls that need to be with certain properties and certain rules. This obviously combined at a certain milestone as a set of requirements in a machine readable way that we've been talking about in the IDS export is a couple of clicks away. So in exports, being able to go create a specification and filter it out. Here's for a specific milestone, so you can choose whether it's the handover milestone, and then creating that as an export and upload it. So that's how kind of quick it is to generate from this visual and human kind of simple interface to create the specification to then export that IDS XML.
And this then dictates that if there is a wall, it should be using that wall. Is that kind of the level of specification you're making here, or?
You could load specific elements into each one of these sort of card with requirements. So you could attach things to the card, etc. Or you could just define it as a specification. It's up to you how much definition you want to provide. And you can say this specific wall type with these specific properties, and even down to what the property should be as well.
Okay. So where is that limit? So how much is this almost like an IDS editor?
Yeah, it is creating you the IDS in a format that is multiple milestones, multiple teams, development over a model over time.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it doesn't use internally the IDS format. You have your own format to describe this, and your own way to verify that as well, which is that IDS is one way to export that.
Right. So now we're exporting it so that if you're not using the verified piece, then you can use Solibri or another tool to be able to verify that you've got a model that meets those requirements.
Are you not afraid that that's cutting into your business?
No, we're as open as all the people in the room, and the principle is that if our customers are already using other tools to check models, we're not going to force them down a workflow that they're not. Yeah. Okay. Yes, obviously it's easier and better and more integrated to be inside of Planoly and not go out, but yeah. You can even inside of the project settings, I could change it so that it doesn't even display that verify module as well. Turn it off. So it's not doing it.
Yeah, but you're not an open source application, right? You say you're as open as everybody else. What does that mean to you?
What does being open mean?
Yeah.
Helping our customers with workflows that are as helpful, as seamless as possible.
Okay.
And
Like open for them to use us how they want to use us.
Yeah.
Not like open source.
Open as an intro.
right.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
sense, yeah.
Looks really nice.
You didn't know about it.
I'm sorry.
You didn't know about it.
I apologize just now.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah, I did not.
I thought that everyone in the US knew this too.
No. I have actually never heard it in context of.
We're sort of getting to a place that there are places, I mean, we might be using it, I don't know, but at the same time, we're trying to avoid documenting stuff. So we're getting more, this is the US, getting in trouble for saying, well, it's a good idea if we do 300. Actually, let's not write that down, because like LOD and this sort of stuff.
Oh.
We get into more trouble if we say it, but we don't do it, but nobody cared, than not saying it at all. This is how the US works.
Yeah, a lot of our users that are writing it down are doing it to protect themselves. So sort of this is the extent of the work that I'm doing, and if there's more than that, I'm going to ask for more money.
Well, so we figured out that actually we don't do 300 for everything, and we don't want to, but if we say that out loud, well, everybody else does 300.
Yeah.
So what we'd say is, well, if there's no requirement, as again, this is just the silliness of lack of good definition. Like these 300 terms don't mean a whole lot. And so it's problematic to use these terms. Like I mentioned before, 2016, my perfect example, the 2016 LOD spec doesn't require openings. The newer versions require major openings. What the hell's a major opening? In a wall. And so we've had scenarios where it was good that we were on the 2016 version, so we weren't expected by a contractor to make those openings. So we've come to believe that we should say less than more.
Yeah, so the principle is that if you are going to, you could document it as a checklist, or you could document it in descriptive form, rather than just that number of LOD 300, because it is so difficult to interpret that. And there's a lot of work across the ISO standards and this concept of level of information need, describing it in a way that people can understand it in a way that machines can also communicate what those requirements are. Yeah. Long conversation on LA.
I should become a lawyer at this point, basically, what my job is. I don't do BIM stuff anymore, so.
But it's clear that it's clear to me that, especially the civil world, is going towards that eventually, right? So there's gonna have to be a way to define deliverables more accurately. And when I say more accurately, of course, in America, that means so that there's no litigation that is a problem, right? As in, you know exactly where you stand and what you need to do. And there's efforts in, I think Australia, is the one that I know of, where they have the level of detail documents very detailed to the bolts and the barriers and stuff like that. You go like, whoa, that's crazy amounts. And I think that's kind of where we need to be, right? If we're actually talking about a deliverable, a 3D model deliverable, then we need to be able to define that.
Well, no, absolutely. So like the point in the US is like people are laissez-faire with what they say LOD in a contract. They don't say which version, and there's a new version every 2 years. So it changes. So all these things are handleable. It's just that the precision around contracting is not there to really deal with these things. And there actually is quite a bit of vagary still in the LED specifications in the US as well.
Yeah, that is why we developed the scope tool. That's kind of the principle, is that if you ask for an LOD 200 something, it might not even be in that document in the specification. It's incomplete when it comes to the whole scope, and then you've got to look at what classification structures you're using, which are different for different companies at different places.
Do you have more owners, or do you have owners as a primary customer often of this, or as end users?
It's whoever cares the most when it comes to BIM, and so owners that are asking for specifically their standards, they're driving it. If you're a contractor, you have to manage multiple different trades across the project, and seeing that you're getting a very diverse set of models in. You want to try and control it. Architects to protect themselves usually against signing up for too much risk. And then engineers that are using it to just document, this is my scope and this is what I'm signing up for.
Yeah. Right, and so that example, I mean, this is a little in the weeds, but like how often do you run into something where the contract is one thing and this is another? Or is it?
Where the what? So the contract is
Well, so like the risk with these sort of tools, at least our experience, is that people do things like the execution plan will be defined for the contract says execution plan will be defined in the outside of the contract, and these sort of tools have decisions in them that are not in the contract, and there's a risk there of. I mean, I guess what I'm thinking is this is separate from a contract, but our contract might reference these sort of things.
We actually do create the contract as well. So everything is in here. If you go to the export, and we create a contract document to say, it has that data transfer agreement and this grid with the detailed requirements, and then maybe filtered for a specific team or whatever. And then asking for approval and saying, I need Clive to sign this as well.
Okay. Yeah, because 60% of our contracts are bespoke to clients. So like we don't get to, we have our standard contracts, but we never get to use them. So like this sort of thing. Okay, so this makes sense.
Yeah. So we would create that agreement, and it would be including all of the detailed requirements. Sorry.
Cool.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Dan, can you make Connor a host? Sure.
Go to Zoom, should have a pop-up. Oh, you don't need to.
I'm just sharing.
I'm sharing.
Okay. All right. I'll just in here and I'll show all of our open standards stuff. It's pretty straightforward. You say you made the boost already?
Okay, again, show up there.
You can hear me through some other microphone, right?
Yeah, I'm just like that.
Good. Share the screen. And we'll take a quick look at this. All right, so IFC is the newest thing that we're trying to incorporate into our BIM workflows. This is very much our starting point. So it's very simple, but it is a great place for us to start. So right now, this is Procore. This is our documents. This is where people manage all their documents. And we are trying to enable more BIM workflows within Procore documents, because we also have an entirely separate Procore-like models tool. But just within the documents itself, we want to enable people who don't own the models tool, who don't want to go through the process of like conditioning their files to be uploaded to the models tool. We want this to be a very straightforward place where anyone can come in and interface with their models. So as you can see, I take a file here and I just drag it and drop it in. First, it uploads the file, and then you can see that it's sitting here and it's thinking about it. We do use ODA to do the processing, so that's what's going on in the background right now with our own processing engine. And when it's all done, it's going to give this green check mark, just like one of these. And when we have that green check mark, actually, I just show this while it's processing. It tells you, hey, this file's processing. But when it's done, so there it is, it's processed. We can now click on that file. And it opens up in what we call a simplified viewer. Our models tool has some more bells and whistles that go along with it. But for the just average user who wants to just throw a file up there and look at it, that gives us the ability to do so. And so right now that, I believe that's an IFC4 file export out of Revit. We process both 2x3 and 4. We're looking very soon to be processing 4.3. That's something we want to start testing, particularly around infrastructure files like bridges. So that's kind of a next step for us, is to start processing those. Now that this file is, here and viewable and in our system, these tools here are all the kind of standard BIM tools. You can measure stuff and look at properties and, look at an object tree. See it by like type and occurrence. If you select an object, you can look at its properties. And we have like a default thing where we select a few things, but we do have an all properties tab, and you can a little bit here. You can go in here. What is this? Filter for a property that you want, just if you want to see what's going on. So it's pretty straightforward, but we're very excited about it. We're giving a little more access to IFC files to our customers,
And this is the kicking off point of other workflows within our BIM tools. Once they're processed, we can do more with them, but that'll be our next steps. And this is certainly the first step is get the files in, make sure they're processed, make sure you can view them, and then we get to do more fun stuff. So we're excited about this. This is currently in beta. I very much plan on closing on that beta next week, and we hope to be going GA the week after that. And just because it's in here and we're showing, not only do we support IFC, but we also do support export BCF. So this is our typical models tool. You can see, again, it has a little more bells and whistles than that simplified viewer. It's got this little thing in the corner here that allows us to navigate. It's got the coordination issues over here that allow us to go and look at things like this conflict in the beam. But our coordination issues is actually a separate tool where we can, once you create them and see them within the model, they're all held over here in a dashboard where we're able to view them all. And you can always isolate them and export them to BCF to be sent out to your favorite BCF viewer and then brought into any of the other systems that you might be wanting to see these coordination issues in. That's our very straightforward use of both IFC and BCF at this point. Both of those we hope to expand on as we move forward, but we are very excited about our current implementations. I think that's about all I have at this point. Any questions? It's pretty straightforward, so.
So that does not export IFC home.
We currently do not export IFC.
Is there any plan to support that?
It is in discussion. Let's put it that way. But I mean, as a construction management tool, importing is, we're more of an end. We don't author anything. We don't create.
That's not what IFC did.
Well, that's right, because one day we're going to want to export and send it to the owner and continue to move it downstream.
Technically, there's all kinds of workflows that IFC could support from the contractor.
Yeah. And so that's kind of where our discussion about IFC is. Yes, we will have downstream users someday that we're going to be sending this stuff to. So yeah, that is in discussion.
So exporting would then be merging into one big file, or what would you export?
In theory, that's possible. We haven't started federating models within our system yet, but
I mean, your export is in discussion, you said, but what are you exporting then? Isn't that then just downloads again?
well, no, because what we would probably be exporting at some point would be the addition of more information. So there's a lot of data fields that contractors need to fill out on an IFC, especially when it comes to handing it off to an owner. And so the hope is that we're bringing files in, we're enhancing those mostly with data, not so much geometry, and then moving it to someplace else where it needs to
So
go.
that's a bit the use case we had yesterday as well with Devin, where you had this fire engineer coming in, adding properties, and then exporting the whole file again with it.
Yep.
Cool, that's nice.
And I think that's, all I have to show.
Can I ask one of those annoying questions then? Like, this is all cool, but do you also plan to have these documents API standards in the future?
That was certainly something that we've been talking about. Hold on, which documents API?
I only know one.
You mean like the building?
buildingSMART.
Okay. That was something that we talked about, especially after the last meeting we had in Boston. And the reason we like that idea is that we know we're not the only place where people are storing their documents. And when you're on a project, you got to be able to move those around. And that's really true because, again, we don't author. So we're going to need to connect to the places that people are storing their documents while they're authoring, because we don't enable, Revit work sharing within our documents. Nobody's going to work off a Revit file inside Procore documents. And the idea that same file can be easily shared over to our system from another one. I think is what was interesting to us, but that required the server to server API, which I don't think has been developed yet.
No, that's right.
And that's I think what we were more interested in.
Cool. So you would join the next phase of that project now?
I think that could be interesting to us. Yes.
Yeah, still under a safe harbor, safe, right?
Yep. Exactly. All under safe harbor. Then we'll leave it there.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm too late, but I have a question.
Go for it.
So as a contracting software, you're probably more interested in certain parts of IFC than other parts of IFC. Like, I would assume that you'd be very interested to do things like scheduling and all that stuff with your data. Is there anything in IFC that's missing because of that?
Yes, but I haven't documented that well enough.
Okay.
When I said that, now that we have it in our system, we get to do cool stuff with it.
Yeah.
That's exactly where we're looking, is how do we start to expand into those other areas? Because there are the different property sets that are out there for construction. There's stuff about scheduling.
Right.
But when we look at it, we do notice like, oh, I wish this was there. Or even when I look at the elements that are there, I'm like, I wish this quantity was, on this type of entity. I just haven't taken the time to start documenting it as thoroughly as I should.
Because it is important, because I think you're going to be receiving software of IFC.
Yep.
And you're basically dictating the use case for that workflow.
Both.
It's going to be really important to know exactly what you do.
Yeah, scheduling, estimating. Estimating is going to come real quick. We're going to hook this right up to our 3D takeoff.
Yeah, quantity takeoff.
Yeah. And so, yeah, quantities is probably the first one we'll look at.
And one thing that came to mind, and this is all under safe harbor statement, inside Bentley is also that the idea that there's different element breakups if you look at construction versus design. And for different reasons, right? So what you're really looking at is you want a roadway to be the whole roadway when you're designing, because you want to be able to identify properties of that whole roadway. But then when you're in construction, you want to schedule that roadway to be constructed.
Yeah.
And you need to split it up into multiple pieces.
The old slice and dice.
Yeah, right. And so that becomes interesting. Like, how do we do that in a model and still maintain IDs and
ask your synchro folks, because they do it pretty well.
Yes. Well, exactly. I'm not going to tell them how. Sorry, I won't tell you how to do it. But and that's something that you're going to hit with IFC as well.
Yeah.
Well, this is something we've had the discussion. I don't know if it came up last time, but certainly you can have relationships between entities and the IFC platform. So that discussion, it's a sort of needed use case that you have a subdivision concept that, well, these two entities are related. So that's a meaningful one. And then the one that's, you mentioned all the time, I mean, I'm always looking ahead a little bit versus, it's going to be a long time to look ahead. But P6 and all these tools are really good with time. Should we really just be linking to them much better versus trying to shove it into IFC?
Problem we deal with the roads, we got 3 unique identifiers that we got to deal with. We've got the long time feature that's carried through from survey and engineering, and we have the financial pay item that we got to deal with, and now the asset folks, the operators are want to do an asset ID.
Yes.
So now we have 3 unique identifiers that are not a one-to-one relationship. In a large percentage of it, it is a one-to-one relationship. But when you look at the DOT and they've got 4,500 item types, as you call them now, 4,500 item types, 10%, still 450 that you got to do some sort of mapping to individually.
And the expectations of the geometry is totally different too.
Yeah.
Like a design geometry is not the same as an operational geometry. People understand that part.
Yep.
But then how do you go from that through construction into an as-built, into operations is a really unanswered question.
When you still have like, you have the exact same but slightly different problem in like mechanical systems. Design mechanical system is no fittings, just basically, sort of raw systems.
Water lines are same way.
Yeah.
Sewer water, you got nodes and you got, lines and you got inlets and manholes and.
Yeah, no real valves, no transitions.
Matter of fact, that was a request when we started looking at things that you're looking at. That was one of the first requests we got a customer was, how can I insert my my valves into this IFC valve? And because they're field located and a lot of pressure pipe is field routed.
I think there's things missing in IFC for drainage in general.
Yeah.
Especially for, for water treatment, the drainage systems, etc. Yeah, I feel like I couldn't find what I needed to use.
Yeah, what are you gonna use with drainage space? I mean,
But
still challenges.
Yes.
yeah, I guess getting back to your question, yes, there's a lot we need to continue to build out there. Goes from content that needs to exist versus or different properties or that we need to have added. But I know that on our side, we for our use cases, document what would work for us and put that out there. And yeah, we don't want to reinvent P6 for sure.
Yeah, because you don't want to wait for a model to start, you want for a final model to start scheduling.
Which is why I think we do have our own estimating tool, and so we'll go that way first. We don't really have our own scheduling tool.
I know that problem.
I don't blame you.
All right, shall we move on with the what's one? Yeah, so we have a couple of options. We have implemented form. Sure. Yeah, apparently, Greg is interested.
Yeah. We also have the ESD section. So at this point, I would say let's hear from the audience what they would like to hear, because I can fine tune the content of the IFC for the implemented form, giving you the high level view where you can find IFC example files, columns, one important information, and an example workflow of what we do inside the IFC for the implemented form. But then I feel I don't want to initiate a discussion on any proposed open topics. That's my feeling.
Which open topic?
IFC for the three implementers forum.
Yeah.
As you know, it's gathering every Thursday, and we have an agenda of topics, open topics that we're facing, mainly fixing and fine-tuning the latest version of the standard.
Yes.
One is georeferencing, a couple of open questions on alignment, spatial structure for infrastructure, couple of issues related to documentation and geometry. So we're trying to find to fix these open questions before the ISO deadline that we presented yesterday.
And so this is more about IFC 4.3 as a whole.
Yeah.
Not anything to do with the alignment-based reference view.
Well, it's actually.
Or
Yeah, no, it's
Okay.
it's actually helping defining the
Yeah.
alignment-based reference because. Okay, I'll do it.
Should we take a break first? I don't know.
I need a restaurant break.
Yeah, let's do a quick break.
I know the first part of this.
Yeah. No, let's do a break altogether.
He'll make comments about it after coming into this world.
Okay, so let's see
Do it.
how quick we can do this one.
All right.
Depends on your reaction. So, IFC for the X implementers forum, that's the official title. Sorry, building one has to keep up with the traditional bad names. It's always like everything in these implementers forum, it goes under the safe harbor statement that we present every time. Very quickly, what it is, it's a joint test effort among the vendors that you see on the screen. It's happening more than 20 vendors across 10 countries, which makes it a little bit difficult on the time zone wise. And then we do discuss all for the 3 domains. So it's not rail, it's not bridge, it's not road, it's everything that concerns for the 3. It has a fairly simple structure. There is a technical coordinator and a lead. The lead is me, the technical coordinator is Peter Bonsman, and the vendors are free to join. It's an open door group, anyone can join. We understand that weekly meetings it's hard to follow. That's why we try to provide an agenda in advance so that people know where to join and when, depending on the topic. We collect sample files and issues using GitHub. This appears to be one of the, let's say, main driver for speeding up implementation. Sample files is the first. Validation service appear to be the great research. Kind of these self-service mechanisms to check IC files during implementation. We use Miro board for to keep the agenda, but also for sketching and draw ideas. And we have a Slack channel that is tied to the GitHub repository, so it has a dual function. People can get in touch with each other without using emails if they have a quick question, especially usually it's towards me. And mainly it's linked to the GitHub repository. So every time there is a new file, every time there is a new issue, people get notifications. Something cool. Yeah, probably. This is the workflow that we follow inside the forum. So usually during software implementation, vendors find a challenge and they bring it to the forum. We try to filter them or triage them to see if there is a possible solution or a proposal for a solution. And then we bring it into the forum and we discuss it with other with fellow vendors to see if anyone else encountered the same challenge or sometimes it's also to evaluate the proposed solution. And the issue can end up in 2 ways, usually 3. Can be the schema update, the documentation update, or can be declared out of scope. Proportion is, at the moment, on the IFC 403 standard, it's 90% documentation update, something that was not clear or not clear enough, and we needed to clarify more or specify. And a few just little, or that way. Few issues are also ending up with schema changes. But in both cases, we try to, as soon as we get a schema update or a documentation update, to create a new rule in the validation service. So this is how vendors are contributing to the validation service, and feed this rule back into the validation service. So we not only update the schema and the documentation, we get new files and we update the validation service, which again are the main resources that we understood vendors are using when they are doing the implementation. Again, the schema documentation, the schema and the documentation, the sample files and the validation service. Question? Okay. I'm not going over this. This is the test workflow, something that we mentioned yesterday. So projects, buildingSMART initiatives have the opportunity to create tests and to submit tests to the forum. This is what, for example, the Railway project is doing. They are creating tests with a given data set and validation criteria, and then they are submitting these tests to the vendors to execute these tests. And then they have an internal process to evaluate the results, formal criteria, expected geometry. There's yeah, there's a lot on these tests, but yeah, I think it's, unless there is an interest from you, I'm gonna skip that one. What I wanted to show you is an example of the type of issues that we discuss in the forum and how they are related to the MVD questions that we got before. So I'm gonna use the example of the georeferencing discussion that we had 1 month ago, a couple of months ago. Now it's mostly resolved. We just need to fine tune the documentation. So this is the mirror board that we use for during the meeting. Sometimes we sketch examples or we copy paste drawings. And one of the most successful type of meetings that we had in the forum were these anatomy classes in which we really open an IFC file like if it was a body, and we look into that and we try to understand how entities are related, how they are connected. And there's not a formal way of representing them. This is supposed to be a instance diagram of entities that I find in files. So in this case, it's a project setup. To do a project setup correctly in IFC, I have to have an IFC project entity with these attributes that is pointing to an IFC geometric representation context, which is pointing to an IFC access to placement 3D, which is pointing to a point, which is set to 0, 0, 0. So these three entities and the pattern is forming what is conceived as a decent, good, normative project setup. So if you have these entities related in this way, you are creating your IFC project correctly. And then, for example, you see that the IFC project has a relationship of type IFC rel aggregates with IFC sites, and then you start the spatial hierarchy from that. But again, this is another module, another component, which is the spatial structure. So in doing this exercise, we are also trying to identify components. So project setup is one thing. Georeferencing is another thing that can be attached to the project setup. So this geometric representation context, which is the definition of the origin of the virtual model, can also be georeferenced. And the way to do that is, at the moment, it has been enriched to allow to express compound coordinate reference system. So in this case, you can see that there is a projected coordinate reference system that is connected to the reference system of the project through this IFC entity called IFC rigid operation. So what we do during these meetings is that we really sketch these pattern to explain people how to connect these entities and how to fill out values. So in this case, the IFC project coordinate reference system needed an IFC well-known text to define the coordinate system itself. So we also provided in the example of the well-known text string to be filled in with the EPSG code and so on. So with this small example, we try to highlight blind spot or find missing pieces of documentation. And then as soon as we have an agreement, we enrich the documentation and we create rules because we want to check this kind of patterns. Question? You don't have to understand this specific example. It's just to give you an idea of the level of discussion that we are having. We are really going down to the level of the entities, how they are connected, if the documentation is good enough for the implementers to actually implement, or if we need to change it or enrich it. And ultimately, having an IFC reference file for the specific georeferencing. So if you go into the repository of the forum, you have this subfolder IFC files, and in IFC files, vendors are uploading under the safe harbor statement. They are uploading their test files and examples. I'm going to open just one. So Here you will find the georeferencing file, so just the last mile of the work on the georeferencing. So after we agreed on that, we also published example files for people to use it as a reference. So vendors in this case, ACCA provided a couple of files. One is actually one of the most rich example that we have of a IFC for the tree file for a bridge. So if someone was looking for a good file of a bridge, this is probably one of the best you can get. It's open, it's public, so you can use it under the license that is specified in the subfolder. So sometimes you find indications on how to use those files. And yeah, in this case, it's just a zip file because the file was a little bit big. And then a brief description. And I think in this case, ACCA also provided a link to their open web viewer so you can visualize and explore this file before downloading it or after. Questions? Okay, that's it. The other important part is that we have these tests. Again, I'm going to just fly high on this. We are collecting tests. Test follows this structure. There is a title, there is an intent. There are sometimes prerequisites because a test might have another test as a prerequisite. You need to be able to do this before doing that. And then we have validation criteria. There is a test data set, of course, and then there are validation criteria. And validation criteria are divided into formal rules, which are rules on the IFC standard and schema specification. So the things that you can check with the validation service to be explicit. Then there are test case specific checks, things that you can check with IDS to be explicit. And then there are informal criteria, expected geometry, control parameters. Let me just show you an example of the test that Rail made a couple of weeks ago. This is stationing on alignment without broken chainage, pretty explicit. The intent is to export the required IFC entity to describe an alignment with a couple of signals along that and without using broken chainage. There are two prerequisite tests for these tests to be taken. So you need to be able to do a project setup correctly. You need to be able to geo-reference your project correctly. The test data set is listed here, a bunch of CSV, XML, DWG, LandXML files. There is a subfolder containing all these files. And then the validation criteria. Again, formal rules. Here, the owner, the creator of the test is simply saying, look, when you give me a file, this file needs to pass the syntax and schema check of the validation service and needs to pass the alignment business 002 and 003 rule of the validation service. On top of that, this file needs to be compliant with these IDS. This IDS is going to check this, that every IFC product must have an attribute name which is not null and not empty. Okay, so all these points, most of these points are translated into an IDS. So in terms of workflow, receiving the file from vendor, checking it through the validation service, must comply to those rules. Checking with an IDS checker, they are free to use whatever they want in this case. And then they go into informal criteria. So things that cannot be automatically checked, at least with the technology that the project has at the moment, like check if the signals are facing opposite directions, like in the data set that I gave you. Expected geometry. They simply provide a geometry, a screenshot of the geometry of the alignment with the two signals, and it has to look like this. And control parameters, like the example that I gave you this morning, the total 3D length of the track alignment is 1,000 meters. So, implementers forum, vendors coming together, finding agreement, fine-tuning rules, fine-tuning the MVD scope and description. In parallel, they can also take tests coming from the other buildingSMART initiatives. Question?
Nobody has a question. That's the question.
Of course.
Yeah, why not? So as an implementers forum, right, we come up with changes to hopefully just documentation, but maybe schema. What is this check after that? Who says that's a good change, that's not a good change? How does that fit into the workflow?
Good question. So at the moment, we have so the schema is tracked on GitHub, and whenever we check whenever we change the documentation and the schema, we need to go through GitHub. In this case, there is a UML if it's in between, if it's the schema. And yeah, there are some gateways, I guess, to check that the IFC schema is compliant with the existing ones. The modifications are compliant with the existing schema. There's always a GitHub discussions, usually among people that are expert of the schema.
Okay.
So like in these missing functions, there was a discussion between Peter Thomas and other people about how to write these functions. And I read yesterday that they have now 4 possibilities, 4 options to write this function, and they are trying to figure out which is the best one to then finally edit the IFC schema. But usually, and most of the time, we hope that these kind of suggestions can come from vendors directly. So when they identify an issue, they put forward a proposal. But I understand that most of the cases, vendors do not have an opinion on the express schema itself.
Or whatever their opinion is, it's usually biased to whatever their domain.
Yeah, that's why we try to socialize the opinion with the rest of the vendors and the forum. Yeah.
So then we get to basically influence the schema, or at least interpretation of the schema. Till when do we do that? Because we're going into ISO voting. At some point, we've voted on this thing. It's going to be set in stone, I'm assuming, right? Or is it still up for interpretation after that?
Well, let's say schema-wise, the deadlines are the one that Liam presented first. Yesterday.
Okay.
So georeferencing the missing function, wrong attribute on a predefined type. So like, 3 or 4 minor corrections are the one that we're going to propose to ISO in case we get comments. Documentation is a little bit more flexible because in theory we could keep on editing. If something is not clear for you to implement, we can always enrich it. Someone will say, this will not be the ISO one. Okay. Someone else will say, I'd rather have something which is clear and easier for vendors to implement than something that is ISO, but it's I cannot understand.
There used to be this relatively hard split between the specification and then implementers agreements. Implementers agreements were basically corrections that came later. Doesn't really make sense to split these. So we want to integrate these things that come later that we used to call implementers agreements, just integrate them more into their documentation.
Yeah, but there's and you know this better than anybody, there's granularity on what words mean, right? Either you try to explain something that was already the whole purpose of it, or it was already the way you're supposed to do it, but you explain it better, but that's just a documentation change. Or you say, no, actually, let me clarify, this should always come before this, and then that was never part of the documentation, and now we're kind of changing the interpretation of the schema. And then there's a whole thing like the where clauses and the IDS and all that stuff is also now. But my point is, what is the standard? What are we saying is going to be the verified standard? And we're not. And we talk about the same thing when we say IFC 4.3. what I'm worried about is that some readers are gonna read it differently than other readers, just because, well, the documentation is like different then, or whatever.
Yeah, but there's no simple answer to this. We've been discussing changes in the validation service over time, and it's exactly the same thing, because we are going to add rules in the validation service over time on how you should do the implementation. And in a way, you could see that parts of the specification are the same. So even if we don't change the documentation or implement agreements or however you want to call it, but just add some rules in the validation service, that's also in a way contributing to more documentation and more clarification. So there is no one simple answer. There will be one schema and there will be an official ISO publication, but there will be multiple additional example files, rules in a validation service, documentation.
Okay.
And as long as they're consistent, that doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. The challenge is to keep them consistent.
Yeah, and also these kind of implementation agreements, historically they always came late. But if you remember what Hangel said before, that 2x3 is still the most supported one and 4 is just there. So when we were browsing the database of implementers agreements, there are hundreds on IFC 2x3 and 4 on IFC 4. That also tells a lot about the amount of effort that vendors put on the schema implementation after that the schema was published. So 2x3 had a lot of effort, hence a lot of agreement. 4 has, 4 agreement. So it's kind of natural. So we observed this in the past. People will keep on implementing and will keep on finding issues. Hopefully, small ones that can be solved through these kind of agreements.
Okay.
To your point, I have a user question. So what he asks is really important for us, because if I'm writing a contract for services to hire a platform, to get a platform, I need to know what to ask for. So what version at a minimum, right? And what are some of the things that from a functionality perspective, the software can do? And that's where that question comes in, because you'll see contracts very specific that you have to be certified or you have to support this version of IFC, because that is going to come soon. So I think that's more of a contractual issue, but how do we resolve that if we are in agreement that the changes are just documentation or enhancements or whatever? How do we communicate that it's okay to use that in a contract language? I guess that's going to be my challenge when my clients ask me to write procurement language.
Yeah, I think it's also a challenge for the buildingSMART, quite frankly.
Yeah.
That question, the simple question is going to be, okay, so what is IFC 4.3? Right? And then you need an answer, for a legal answer, and that's not a simple task, because like you said, it's complicated.
Yeah, isn't that a project? Yeah. Project implementation requirements document that you have to create if you're going to follow the open bin workflow. You have the OIR, the EIR, all that type of stuff.
It's the ISO 19650 stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And that would set out your requirements that you're expecting your contractor and employees to follow. I've just taken the training, so that's. So in reality, the training and what we do in reality are two different things. So this sounds like what I learned, that would be the PIR, and that would be the requirements that you guys are talking about later. Yeah, but I think the point is that in those requirements, someone would say you need to use IFC 4.3.
Mm-hmm.
But then on our side, we need to define what that means. What is that IFC 4.3? Is it the schema, is it specification, does it include the rules? It could not be in the requirements from the owner.
I don't think you need to answer that, I think the owner needs to answer that, what they actually.
No, I don't think so. I think BSI needs to answer that, because if I'm requiring a software developer to be certified or validated through BSI procedures,
Yeah.
right? Because that's the whole point of being a member, is that there is that connection, right? There is a governance and there is a procedure that is followed. And that makes me feel comfortable that I can use your product without me knowing how to do that.
And would it, I mean, in the requirements, if you put in there that they're supposed to deliver the alignment-based reference view, you know, for IFC 4.3, and it needs to be matched against a particular IDS, would that not narrow it down?
Yeah, we need to have very clear definition of what validation is.
Yes.
Does that include the rules of the validation service or not?
Does that include subsequent implementers forum discussions or not?
And does an owner have to call out those, like, you must validate in this way? Or should that just be assumed on buildingSMART side, that if an owner calls this out, that's all in there?
Yeah, I think that's, most of that is us, honestly, yeah.
Yeah.
For IDS, that is, we have these 18 test cases that make it very clear what do we mean with an IDS, when should it fail, when should it pass. And for IFC, that's, I think most of it is quite clear, because it's not that different from IFC 4. The only open topic there is this moving target of the validation service rules, which is in principle a good thing, a good problem to have, because it improves quality. It's exactly the same question as we had before on versioning.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's the same thing as versioning, yes,
Yeah.
but it's a versioning without actually versioning change. It's like, oh, no, it's the same version, we just interpret it differently.
Yeah.
And that's what worries me, because if that's the case, then are there any files that now are interpreted differently and hence are invalid or different, at least to the point where it's broken?
Yeah, but yeah, you're right, but honestly, I don't know what's worse, because some of these rules are there because someone brought up the fact that the documentation or the platform of entity, these concept templates that we mentioned before, were not clear enough. So if we didn't do that rule and we left it there, someone could have asked for IFC for the 3, whatever that means. And then at a certain point, the vendors get to the page where the alignment patterns is specified, and then whatever.
But because it's not clear.
That's
this-
easy, yeah. That's for a contractor, that's where the profit is. So if you then further define that you can't just do anything you want, but you have to stick to clear rules, that costs money.
Yeah.
And flexibility is sometimes a plus, not only.
I'm gonna quote you, because I have your record saying that flexibility.
I know, I said exactly, I know. But that's true.
That's
That's
actually
actually
your tagline.
Both sides.
Flexibility is very dangerous. This is wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, but you're right, you're right.
I mean, if you give people the flexibility to do things, they will do it. I mean, seriously. So if you then after the fact, define what, oh, no, that it wasn't that flexible, it's supposed to be this obviously. That probably means that there's some files out there that are no longer according to the same.
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
That was my point.
What happens already now with alignments?
Yeah, the alignment open discussion, the reason why the rule that they've asked you to develop is still on hold, is because we don't have a conclusion on that topic. Alignment has to be part of a side of a project, whatever.
Right.
But that
was a very good
It'll
product.
actually be a new version of it as well. It will be a new version. Wouldn't that be an actual update of the schema?
No, in this case, it's mainly documentation, because there's nothing in the documentation at the moment, as of now, there's nothing telling you where, if and where you need to connect alignment to a site or a project. There's nothing saying that.
Which to me means that it's going to be all over the place. right? And that's already the case. And there's actually viewers that can't handle alignments because it's attaching to a road versus the site. I won't go into this, but like, this is a very good example of exactly the point we're making.
And it originally, and actually I think 99% of the examples that we have are linking the alignment to the site, but then someone brought it up that for infrastructure, it doesn't make really sense because you can have multiple sites. Plus, when it comes to file federation, this can be a big problem. So
it boggles my mind that it's not obvious to everybody, but this is exactly why it's important to talk to each other, because apparently it's not obvious to people, but like, if you have roadways, and you can multiple roadways in a file, the alignment of the road, the center line of the roadway has to be part of the roadway, not the site, isn't it?
yeah.
So when you go, but if you do that, then all of a sudden people go, no, I have to be on the site. This is why this is an open discussion. And maybe it should stay open. Maybe the flexibility is necessary because there's multiple use cases where you have different needs.
Yeah, and when you view it, how do you view that? Because it's a 2D alignment. Which vertical you gonna apply to it to display it within 3D?
Well, that's handled actually, but
there's options. I mean, there's.
Well, we also don't handle multiple profiles.
Yeah,
that's the other problem.
Which is.
We do at the moment, right?
Yeah.
Given the latest discussion.
Well, okay, sure, yeah, fine.
Nigel's proposal is still a valid one.
Yeah, he did that not the last meeting, 2 meetings ago.
Yeah. So if that's some sounding, that will become sensible default.
So that's interesting. You say that word again, sensible default, and we never actually got to talk about it. What is a sensible default to you, and how is it defined?
I think the best example is probably spatial structure. So spatial structure was defined by for the tree as very flexible.
Yeah.
But we got feedback that flexibility in this case can hinder interoperability.
Right.
And we started collecting files from vendors, and we saw that, everyone was making its own spatial structure. So we started asking 2 questions. First, what's the problem? Because in infrastructure, differently than from building, federation might not rely on spatial structure that much. So in building, federating files like architecture, structural and mechanical is done also using the spatial structure, because they are positioned, the different spatial containers are positioned and you use them to overlap the floors of a building. In infrastructure, it's not the case. At least that's what we hear from the experts, because the alignment is the most important thing. Then if the spatial containers are purely functional breakdown, views without placement, just convenient for human beings to group things in under these spatial container or under these other spatial containers. But the position of the objects that are placed along the alignment is driven by the alignment, not by the starting point of some bounding box of a road.
Correct.
That's true. So for building is working this way. So that was the first question. So flexible spatial structure is a problem when you rely on it for federation. But then we understood that we could provide some sensible defaults, like for combinations of projects like rail and road, rail, bridge and road, multiple variations. We provide some defaults like the site, the road and the bridge, and then the road part, like the one that the example that you provided. Yeah, from that, it's actually a good one, how to break down a road. And that can become a sensible default for a road. When it's a road on a bridge, probably it's not working. I don't know.
But that would be then a document definition that is shared between vendors? I mean, how does this get defined as sensible default?
At the moment, the best idea is to have another paragraph in the documentation that says sensible default, a couple of nice diagrams, and a bullet point breakdown. As easy as it is. The question is it normative, or we transform it into a rule that triggers a warning, like you're out of the sensible default, FYI. And difficult. I think I don't have anything else.
I need to read. So,
Well, I guess my only question is, there seems to be things left to do. What can be done? I mean, like, is there like a list of like, these are the tasks left to finish, or is it a little more open than that? And if there is a set list, is there a way to speed it up?
Good question. There is a to-do list. I know it because I made it, because it's all on me. So I think that we have 8, 9 items. 2 of them are schema editing, and I already hand them over to the people that are actually editing the schema. The rest is documentation. And yeah, I'm looking for help. So if anybody has, because sometimes these georeferences is a perfect example. So I know that we need to enrich the documentation of a certain entity, but I'm not a subject matter expert. So I need someone to give me the sentence to be placed in that subchapter of the documentation, and then I can do it easily.
Right now, this is not a paid or funded project, or is it like within BSI to finish this work?
Well, we're paying Evandro's salary.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Not enough.
All right, just
It's not an official project with a project leader and funding.
Right.
It's really committed vendors coming together, coordinated by buildingSMART.
okay. Trying to get the score. That's all.
No, and actually what we did, if you understood correctly, the first slide and the first morning. Sorry. When Liam presented the workflow, the possibility of ISO branches, let's say, if we're gonna get feedback on georeferencing, I'm confident to say that I'm not worried, because in parallel we've been working on that. And if they say georeferencing has this issue, voila, it's already done. So this is the schema, this is the documentation, and by the way, we have sample files.
Yeah.
So we are trying to mitigate these
Yes. Okay, that makes sense.
scenario in which we will see feedback. Thank you.
All right.
All right. There was one final topic on the agenda on BSD. Anyone still interested?
I am.
But happy to call it, yeah, well, let's stay.
Well, to make my plane, I'll definitely do that.
Yeah, so like I said, I have 20 minutes, half an hour presentation, like PowerPoint slides, because Arthur is not here, just to give you an overview of what it is. I think most of you already know what it is.
Yeah.
I can share some links and the support email for Arthur, to kind of, if you have questions for deep dive. Yeah, and then call it a day. There are two.
I know. Thank you.
There are 2 slides that I still did want to show, and that's, of course, thank you, Procore. It's been wonderful. Like I said, we raised the bar again for the next one. And that brings us to the other last slide I wanted to show. The next one is indeed already set, 30 and 31st of August. Near France at Dassault Systems. Registration is already open. You're looking at me.
No,
That's okay. Yeah. Registration is already open.
The only thing is, it's not last year.
2020.
That's okay. Versioning is an issue.
I knew your look had something in it. Yeah, so that's the next information meeting where we're probably going to deliver similar topics with different nuances. By then, we should have passed a couple of deadlines on IFC 4.3, so there will be probably more focus on software certification, hopefully by then. Maybe also these API projects. We haven't really talked about documents API, foundation API this time. So maybe we do that more next time as well, a little bit depending on how things goes.
Do we accept suggestions?
Of course.
From this group in terms of items and.
Of course, always, yes. Yeah, feel free. Let me see, I also had a couple of open things here. Yeah, we still have a couple of tickets for the Rome Summit. I shared the link in the Zoom meeting, but if you Google buildingSMART Summit Rome, you'll get this as well. I will share the links of the BSDD, so you can follow up on that if you want. And you all have this link as well at the back of your t-shirts. General Assembly Implementer. So as you see, we have all of the videos and PowerPoints of all of the previous meetings, and Dan is going to put the ones from this meeting there as well. And as you see, also here the link to register for the Paris meeting is also. So that should be everything you need. It will take probably a couple of weeks until after Rome, right? Until things are up.
Yeah, probably after Rome.
Yeah, I know we can be optimistic, but realistically, it will be after Rome before there's time to process the videos.
And actually, on that note, if anyone's presented here and has a presentation that they show, please send it to me as long as you're happy to share it. I'll follow up anyway.
Then from our side, that's it. Any comments or questions from you guys? And thank you again. It was a wonderful meeting. I was just telling someone that I've been complaining yesterday all the way back from here to our hotel, how wonderful these meetings are. We need to do them more, and we need to do less of the other meetings. So you really make my day yesterday and today again as well. Thank you so much.